Alrighty, well, I'd like to thank you for joining me on my podcast. I'm excited to have you. And so, for the first part, can you please explain a little bit about yourself for those who don't know who you are?
Sure. My name is Kurt Perry. I am a actor out of New York City. I've been performing professionally since I was like 14. Um, Started in regional theater, studied classical music and theater while I was in school. Excuse me. And then moved to New York in 2013, worked regionally for about 10 years. And this is my first tour. Very exciting. So I'm very excited to be touring with Peter Pan right now.
That's awesome. And so, what was the audition process like for Peter Pan?
So generally, sort of in our post-COVID world, the audition process has really changed. It used to be it was like all in the room, and it was you were always going somewhere. Nowadays, generally, the process for a production like this is you get a tape either from a self-submit or from your agent, and they give you some material. For example, I had two short scenes, then I had to have a song of my own. So you'd have to have material prepared already, and then you would do sides that were specific to the show. And then usually there's a dance call that goes with it. Funny story though, I like to joke with Lonnie, our director, that I worked really hard not to book the show because I didn't want to do the dance call. I was in the middle of doing Music Man at the time, and I just didn't have time to do the dance call. So I recorded the sides and the song I had pre-recorded from another audition. And I said, sorry, I can't. Here's my dance reel. Enjoy. And that's why you should always have a dance reel, because sometimes you're not going to want to do the dance call. Um, but then, so after that was our first round. Then I got a second, and then I got a call back, and they asked me to record everything again. And they asked me to record the dance again, and I was like, oh no, sorry, no time. Uh, and then for my final callback, that was in person in New York City with the whole creative team. And that one I did have to dance. So
You couldn't just
you'll have
pull
to
a
do it
video
eventually.
out and
I
be
put it
like,
off
"This,
as long as you can.
this is my dance call here."
Exactly. It's like just holding my phone up to the table. No, that being said, I do have to say our choreographer Lauren Lataro and her associate were both lovely, lovely in the room, gal. So
That's awesome. And so, what made you want to become an actor?
what made me want? Well, my family are musicians. My dad's family were musicians. My mom's family aren't performers, but they were very invested in the arts. So I've always had like theater and music around me. Um, there was a period of sort of growing up. I loved musical theater, but there was sort of a time where like I also play a bunch of instruments, and I was like, oh, maybe I want to go to school for performance in one of those. There was a period of time where I had sort of resigned myself to never really having I had, because of some negative influences, I had sort of decided that I would never have a career. So I was going to become a director. And I spent some time working as a director. But really, it's just for me personally, and I do believe that there are people like this in the world, where there's just something in you that you cannot change, that you must be an artist. And I think that that is just something that even if I wasn't doing this professionally, I would still be doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And so, being on tour, you've stopped at a lot of places. What have been some of your favorite stops and why?
Um, we, you know what? We were in Cincinnati a couple of weeks ago, and Cincinnati is such an unassuming city. Because I live in New York, and it's sort of between Cincinnati. It was like New York and Chicago, and like these two huge cities. But I loved Cincinnati. It was big enough that it felt like a city, but small enough that like we could walk everywhere, and like the people were really nice, and we had a great time. I really enjoyed Cincinnati. Um, we haven't done the West Coast part of our tour yet. We're sort of still in the first chunk, so we're on the East Coast. Um, but I'll tell you where I'm looking forward to going. I am a big Disney person. We're going to Orlando. I'm very excited. We're also going to Mexico. We're going to Monterrey, which I'm very excited for. And we're also going to spend some time in San Diego, which I have never been to, and I love San Diego, so I'm very excited for that.
That's awesome. And so, what's the hardest part about being on tour?
The hardest part, I well, I've always really traveled well. I travel. I'm pretty good at organizing. I'm pretty good at keeping everything where it needs to be, and so touring is not terribly stressful for me. I think the travel days are probably the most stressful part. Um, and not because it's like hard, but because it's just like I have to pack everything and I have to, get everything organized. Because when you're in a hotel, you like spread out, and then all of a sudden I have to put everything back in the bags that I took them out of.
That's awesome. And so, if you could play any other characters in Peter Pan, who would it be and why?
Oh God. Hmm. And Peter Pan. I mean, Hook is a great role. Love Hook. But I like Peter's music is beautiful. The music they wrote for Peter is absolutely gorgeous. So I think maybe one of either Peter or Hook. Mostly because I just want a bigger dressing room.
And I think the thing that's different with this tour with Peter is Peter's played by a guy this time, where
That's true.
well most of the time it's played by a female.
Correct.
Um, and so you've been acting, you said since you were 14. What has been your favorite show you've been in and why, and what has that show improved your path in acting?
Oh, what are my favorite things I've done? Um, High school was sort of a dearth for me. Our theater teacher was not particularly kind to me. So this for anybody listening, if you don't get a lead in your senior show, that does not mean you cannot have a career as actor. Because I played the mayor in Bye Bye Birdie my senior year, and I'm on a national tour. So there you go. I think the one of my favorite things I did early on was I did a show called Blood Brothers, which is not super well known in the States, but it's very famous in the UK. That was a really moving experience. It was one of the first times I felt like a real artist. Um, that show I did Hairspray a couple of years ago in Kentucky. Um, and that just kind of gave me enough information to know that I'm never going to be a drag queen because my God is drag hard. Um, and then I did a reading of a show a couple of years ago. I got to originate a role. Um, it was a adaptation of A Midsummer Night's Dream set in post World War One Louisiana, and it was called By Moonlight, and it is one of the best new musicals I had ever heard. And I really hope that it makes its way off Broadway over the next couple of years. I know the guys who wrote it, and everybody who is attached to it wants to come back and do it. So that is one that I am that was probably one of the most moving experiences I've ever had.
That's awesome. And so, if you had any advice for your younger self, what would it be?
Oh God, get in a dance class. Get in a dance class. This is whenever someone asks me what advice you have for like your younger self, younger actors, whatever. No matter how brilliant you think you are, get in a dance class, because regardless of your type, you're going to always need to be able to dance better than you currently do. Like unless you're like a what the hell is Ryan's last name? Like a J. Armstrong Johnson dancer, or like a Karen Ziemba or a BB New. Unless you're that kind of dancer, you will always. That's always nobody likes the dance call. Like I promise.
That's awesome. And so, this next question actually is like, I think you already answered it, but like, what advice would you give to others who want to pursue acting?
Yeah. So I again dance, 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 dance. Especially if you're a singer. If you're There's no such thing as like pure singer tracks anymore. You are going to have to dance, especially once you get to a certain level. There is going to be some expectation of movement and choreography. The other piece of advice I would give. This is the big piece of advice I received, and sort of transformed the way that I moved through the industry. Is your authenticity is your greatest weapon in this industry. being yourself. And it's sort of cliche, but when I say that, it's not just like being yourself. It's about knowing what you think is right as an artist and trusting that you have a certain taste level. And it's also knowing when you don't know. It's being aware of when you do know what's right and when you need help, and not being afraid to ask for help.
That's awesome. And so this next question is the final one. What has playing Smee taught you?
I what I think Smee has taught me is to sort of trust my instincts a little bit. I think that because we are a long running show, most of the shows that I've done are, once you get like a 6 week run or an 8 week run, and once in a while you get like a 12 week run. But because we're running for upwards of, at this point we're scheduled out for almost a year. Um, Comedic instincts and just trusting yourself to know what people will think is funny is sort of what I've learned. Where it's like you can't predict what people will think is funny, but if you think it's funny, probably other people will think it's funny.
That's great. And so I'd like to thank you for joining me. And I had a great time. So once I am done editing the background and stuff, I will send it to you. Feel free to upload it, share with everyone. And yeah,
Fabulous.
I'll talk to you later.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Have a good night.